It's true. When I ordered cable for the house after I moved in, I watch a lot of movies. We agreed that we would not patronize certain entertainers, directors, producers who were on the Me Too list. It's this list that Time or Newsweek started in, I think it was in 2017, November 2017. I think the first name on it is Weinstein. And there's like over 100 names of people whose careers were adversely affected. We agreed that we would not patronize any of those people. So last night, The Usual Suspects was being broadcast. No commercials, of course. And I was watching it in my room with the door closed, and I even had headphones on so Aunt Alicia couldn't hear it. And the reason why I didn't want her to hear it is because Kevin Spacey's in it, and Kevin Spacey is on the list. And apparently everybody in the family, including my grandparents and great aunts and great grandparents, thought that Aunt Alicia was a little hoodoo from the moment she was born, you know, kind of psychic. She burst into my room, and I thought she was actually going to break my television set. She did pull the cable out, and she pulled it out so violently that I don't know if it's even going to work now. She comes in there and she's saying, "He's a pedophile! He's a pedophile! We agreed! We agreed!" And she's yelling and screaming and practically like bouncing off the walls like a whirling dervish or a demon or something. And, you know, I'm like this at first, and I'm like trying to talk to her in my social worker voice, and it's not working. She's just getting madder and madder and madder. And so finally I just started screaming, "Shut up! Alicia, shut up! Shut the fuck up!" And that didn't work either. And finally she ran out of my room and slammed the door, cracked it. I mean, you could actually hear the wood cracking when she slammed my door. And so I just sat there. I sat there without moving, and I'm like shaking like this because that's what happens whenever I get that deep into disagreement with anybody. I mean, usually, I just leave, but it was my room. I suppose maybe I should have left anyway, even though it was my room. So about 3 hours later, and it was after midnight. In fact, it was probably after 1 a.m. Aunt Alicia knocks on the door very softly. She comes in, and honey, she doesn't cook, so I know she didn't make those cookies. I know she must have gone out, bought the cookies, put them in the oven, brings them up on a warm plate. And I guess, you know, thought we were going to make peace. And I found out some really shocking shit that I had never heard before. And the most shocking thing of all, she told me something that I can admire about my mother. So Aunt Alicia comes in with her fake plate of homemade cookies and says, "Do you remember Uncle Edward?" Uncle Edward, Uncle Edward, Uncle Edward. "I don't have an Uncle Edward." That's what I said. And she said, "Well, but that's what you called him. That was the last man that your mother dated." And I'm thinking, and my age of consciousness was kind of late. I think it was before kindergarten, or they probably wouldn't have let me go to kindergarten. They probably would have held me back. But apparently the last time my mother dated was when I was 4 years old. Well, I didn't remember Uncle Edward. "Well, tell me about Uncle Edward." And so she says that she tells me about the last time they saw Uncle Edward. She would just cut to the chase. And so the last time they saw Uncle Edward, he was running down the stairs. But my mother and Aunt Alicia were both downstairs, and I was upstairs in my room playing. And Uncle Edward apparently came from the direction of my room, running down the stairs with his pants practically falling off him, and he's clutching himself like this and screaming and yelling and saying, "You bitches! You bitches! You bitches!" and runs out of the house. Aunt Alicia and my mother they don't know what's going on because they've been downstairs. But they, of course, rushed to my room to see if I was okay. And apparently, I had blood on my mouth. And of course, they naturally freak out until my mother calmed down. And they, I'm sure I could just picture them. They were like holding me in all sorts of angles and directions and shooting a flashlight in my mouth to make sure it was okay. All the teeth were there, and there was no blood gushing out of my mouth, no blood gushing out of my nose and eyes and ears. And while they were doing this, I said something like, "He showed me this monster and I was scared and I bit it." I don't remember that happening. I didn't even remember it vividly described in all the color and authenticity that Aunt Alicia is able to apply to a story. And she finally said, "Well, that's not the end of the story." She said, "That was a special moment for the three of us as family." And so then she told me about the old man that lived next door to the house that Alicia and my mother grew up in. And this old man, long story short, no pun intended, was pulling out his monster starting about when they were, my mother claimed, because she could practically remember to the moment she was born, like Ray Bradbury. And she says that he started doing it as soon as they could walk because he was their sometime babysitter. My mother would just get mad and throw a tantrum when he did that to them. And eventually, Aunt Alicia just started refusing to go next door. My mother was the kind of person who was probably born with a plan. My mother, after Aunt Alicia got to the point where she refused to go anywhere near being alone in the house, either our house or the old man's house, my mother kept going and apparently kept letting him make her play with the monster until the right moment came. And she apparently bit him so hard. It involved stitches, jail time, and him moving away.